Joining me now to talk more about that, joining our political panel here, we have Leslie Sanchez, CBSN political contributor, Republican strategist, Nancy Cordes, Frank Luntz, CBS News contributor, make sure I get your title right, and GOP pollster. So, Frank, first to you, what was your impression of Governor Walker's speech?
Well, the first thing is that he came out and they put the podium down under the stage. So he's right out there. He's got one teleprompter in front of him, but nothing on the sides. And he knew his words very well. Second, the America Deserves Better is a national slogan. And you can tell that this is something we're going to see between now and Election Day. It's hopeful, and it's also empowering for voters that are simply tired and frustrated. Now, 70% of Americans think that the country's off on the wrong track. 65% think that their kids are going to have a worse quality of life than themselves. That phrase, America Deserves Better, is directed specifically at them, to tell them that there could and would be a change if they go from Barack Obama to Donald Trump.
He didn't mention Donald Trump all that much, Frank.
No, he did not. And it's interesting because his was much more a speech for governors, senators, congressmen, and much less about the presidency. But you could catch it. I mean, it was clear in that speech that this was a national statement and meant to be a kinder, gentler indictment of the last 8 years.
Leslie, what are your thoughts on that? Kinder, gentler, kind of. Indictment.
Well, he did say Hillary Clinton should be in prison.
That's
not that kind of gentleman.
Then it actually is an indictment. I guess it's a conviction.
It's a literal indictment.
Conviction. There you go. Well, I'm not a lawyer, so.
Leslie, what do you think?
Wow, so softer. You know, we avoid the plagiarism issue, hopefully, on this kind of a tone and movement. It's definitely the mantra, and you can see it's building. I think, if anything, it is building this narrative as we get closer to Trump's crescendo, talking about the alternative. And as much as people like to say that it is a negative tone that Trump has, and he's, pushing on fear, there is a sense of optimism to that, about turning the corner, coming up with something different and a new alternative. And I think that is probably going to be part of this small contrast we hear.
So Scott Walker struggled in a crowded Republican field this time around because a lot of people felt that he was a little bland, kind of white bread, got lost in the shuffle. So this was Governor Walker coming out and trying to shake things up and, doing it without a podium to say, hey, look, I've got charisma. I can give a great speech. And the call and response was part of that, to try to gin up audience enthusiasm. America Deserves Better could make for a great campaign slogan if he decides to run again in 2020. So this was all about sort of trying to change his image a little bit from the image that dogged him in the primaries.
Can I ask one question? We're watching all these different speeches to see how people react.
Yep.
In this speech, for 2 or 3 minutes, they stayed on their feet. And I think they did so because it was so close to the front of the stage that people felt electrified. Compare this to some of the other speeches we've heard over the last 48 hours. Don't you think the audience was a little bit more engaged, a little bit more enthusiastic?
Absolutely, and it was fun to see what you normally see much more of at these conventions, which are the signs, all the hoopla, the symbolism.
That's really
what these conventions are supposed to be about. So clearly somebody had put thought into, having people hold up those signs, America Deserves Better, and of course that is going to create energy and enthusiasm, especially if it is paired with a rousing speech.
Frank, what about the language, though, what he used to describe, Donald Trump, and basically saying that anything's better than Hillary Clinton was essentially the summation of his endorsement, if you will.
It's very similar in the subject matter to Chris Christie in terms of an indictment. But what is different is that where Christie went and did specifics in foreign policy, this was very much a domestic policy speech. And I thought it was interesting that he specifically mentioned the cops. We've heard them mentioned every single night, multiple times every night. I wonder how they're going to handle that in Philadelphia. Because if they try to do the same approach, let us stand up for our police, there's a significant percentage of those delegates there, particularly Bernie Sanders delegates, that are pretty angry with the police right now. How do the Democrats match that? I don't know.
But I have a question for you, Frank, because, part of the challenge with coming on day 3 of a convention like this is, you know, some of the things that you're saying are bound to have been said before. And in this case, you know, he was probably the 10th or 15th person to say that Hillary Clinton should be behind bars. In the focus groups that you do you think that this is an effective message for people to be getting repeatedly? Does it cement an image of Hillary Clinton, sort of the way that John Kerry was swift voted in 2004, or is it overkill, as the Clinton campaign argued in a fundraising email today? Does it amount to a witch hunt that turns people off?
What is different about this Republican convention is that they entered it not united. And so it was necessary. The choice of Mike Pence, the choice of speakers over the last 72 hours, this really strong approach to Hillary Clinton is going to unite all the Republicans, which other candidates have not needed to do. This does not appeal as effectively to independent and undecideds because they want to know what you are for rather than what you are against. But they don't have a choice here. There are too many Republicans challenging Trump on the right and in the establishment. That won't happen after, and I've been to the different delegations. When this convention is done, the Republicans will leave it united, but they will not have done the same messaging for independence that other conventions have done.
And obviously in a state like Ohio, which is kind of the ultimate battleground state, you know, independents hold the key. I was interviewing Senator Sherrod Brown today, who said, you know, it plays great in the hall, but I have had to run statewide in Ohio. You need to appeal to independents. These kinds of speeches will get you to 35 or 40%, but they won't get you all the way.
I think we're changing. I think part of where I think Frank is going too, we have to start looking at this through a different lens, because these are two candidates, we've been saying this whole time, with extraordinary negatives that are about 60, 61, they're actually much higher than that in some cases, but they're almost equal. So it's becoming a choice between temperament and corruption. And as negative as that sounds, I promise you, coming out of these conventions, especially coming out of the next one, that's how the Republicans are going to paint it. People are saying the lesser of two evils. It's very unfortunate. Normally you have solutions and ideas, a bit more optimistic, but this is that indictment that he's talking about, and it's not going to slow between now and November.
And it's not going to be pleasant. I mean, let's be candid.
No, not at all.
We're going to have 110 days of absolute hell on the campaign trail, and by the time it's done, as you start to interview voters, they're going to be furious with both candidates. So the question then becomes, who do you dislike least? Who do you distrust the least?
Frank, I wonder, when you have conversations with Republican voters, what is the feeling among moderates, people who consider themselves, you know, moderates? Where do they find themselves now at this point in the Republican Party?
Honestly, conflicted. They don't want Hillary Clinton, but they have trouble with Donald Trump's temperament. And that's why tomorrow night is going to be so important. It's going to have the most amazing rating, because everyone is going to tune in to find out which Donald Trump do you get. If he delivered a message tomorrow that never mentioned Hillary Clinton even once, I would argue that that would be one of the biggest surprises of any convention and one of the most powerful statements that he could make, that he wants to be the actual president of the United States.
And you think that kind of, you know, non-attack mode, I guess, for lack of a better word, is what could appeal to those moderates?
You've had accountability on Monday in terms of national policy, national security, accountability on economic security. Now you're having it in other ways. They've done it. They've done it well. I mean, these speeches are well constructed. Giuliani, Christie, Donald Trump Jr., who tested through the roof in our focus groups. Thursday night, if I were running the campaign, I would remove all the attack and only be positive.
Wouldn't that ring as inauthentic? When we have seen Donald Trump on the campaign trail, this is something that he did during the primaries, gave nicknames to his opponents, you know, kind of had attack mode as his default mode.
Right. No, I think what you're exactly onto something. The reason that I do believe he has that appeal, and I consistently hear it, is he is authentic. You may not like him, but you respect him. You at least, you know, when he came out early on.
I'm sorry. Let's go ahead. I think Senator Rubio is appearing here.
Dramatic music.
Yes, by video. Let's go.